Hey everybody out there, you're tuned in to 91.8 The Fan, and I have a special guest in the corner that's a returning guest. Would you like to unveil your identity to the masses?
Does it help that? No, I guess I should take off the mask. I don't think anyone can see this anyway. Nice to be back, 91.8 The Fan. This is Uncle Yo, anime convention geek specific stand up comedian. Very nice to be back on the airways with you guys.
And we're very happy to talk with you again. I was actually super surprised when I went back to the old interview to see what we covered, and I was like, this was back in 2010. Have we really not talked or seen this guy in like 4 years?
The days before Homestuck, the days before Tumblr, the days before convention fan convergence, and we lost all of our identity to the slew. Oh, yes.
Well, I actually think it's really funny because you and I have never met face to face, despite the fact that we both traveled to a ton of conventions.
I did 26 shows last year. That was 26 out of 52 weeks a year I was out. And I know that there are some people who will scoff at that, the vendors or voice actors, but considering so much of it is done on a shoestring zero budget, just really couch surfing and hotel floor surfing. I mean, sometimes it's rougher than others, but it's always worth it to hit just new areas of the country, different fan groups, shake new hands, meet new faces.
No, I totally understand. I mean, last year I went to around 20, I think, and I don't have an exact number because I know how much the fan went to, but I don't know the exact number I went to. And a lot of times I'm like, oh, I only got to see this certain voice actor that we've talked to, or this certain person we've talked to once. But for whatever reason, I never bump into you. I don't know why.
There are several people that I follow on Twitter that I know end up going to very many conventions, and I end up following their photos on Twitter, trying to meet them face to face. For the last 2 years, I've been trying to find the Blitz comic guy, a comic creator named Simon, who does the web comic What Stays at a Convention, What Happens at a Convention Doesn't Stay at a Convention. And I always feel like we're just around the hall from each other, but I've never been able to run into him, despite maybe being in the same panel room sometimes.
I know that feeling. I've actually gotten to a point where this is a story from Otakon Vegas. I was at Otakon Vegas and wasn't there for 91.8 The Fan. I was there for Shark Robot, which makes our shirts. And I was helping out their booth and I was like, Ian's here. And I haven't seen Ian in a year and I just talked to him and he's doing the Space Dandy thing. I need to just say hi. Like just how are you doing? And so I'm looking at all the possible opportunities I can see him. It's the second day and he starts walking by and I recognize the beard and I'm like, Ian! And he looks at me and he's like, oh my God, Jackie! And he suddenly hugs me and the coincidence was great, but I've never been that lucky ever again.
You'll get to it. I mean, you hear enough of his work, you're bound to run into him at some point.
Well, it's just with anyone in general. Ian's the only one that, just as I was thinking about him, he magically appeared like a genie, but I'm still waiting for that to happen with other voice actors and people of note.
Just run down the list, saying their name into a dark bathroom mirror. If it summons them, you know you're on the right track.
It's like the Beetlejuice thing. Well, Beetlejuice isn't as scary as what is it, Bloody Mary, I
You've
think is
already
the
said
mirror
it.
one.
You've already said it twice. Be very, very careful about that.
Okay, I'm
They're on
sorry.
very bad terms with each other.
Oh, I'm sorry. What happened between you two?
No, I was saying between BJ and BM. Although I'm sorry, you guys promised me that I would keep it G-rated.
Fair enough. That's a story for the after hours. But since we haven't talked to you in so long, there must have been different changes to your show and your performance because you've gotten used to going to conventions so much and you've probably seen the convention scene grow.
What I've really seen is something miraculous. Is despite the recession that has been, we're still feeling the after effects from in America, but the luxuries that I found, the luxuries of anime, of comic books, of video game grinding, very few of those industries actually suffered during the recession. What I ended up seeing almost across the board, almost every convention, whether it was a first year or a second year, ended up springing up and continuously rising in convention attendance to a point where I start to wonder, is anyone really losing their jobs as much as the news are telling us? As of the summer of last year, 2013, there were 30 Brony specific conventions registered across the US for the year 2013. By September, it had risen to 40. Many of those will probably fizzle out over the next year or two. Some of them probably won't come back for a second year. But still, the idea that there are that many shows that often on the year. I remember first entering the circuit. I mean, we're talking 2006, 2007. There'd be maybe one or at most two anime conventions specifically happening any given weekend across America. At this point now, you go to animecons.com and they've simply exploded just the anime cons, excluding video game specific cons, excluding board game conventions, excluding sci-fi and fantasy cons, or even excluding the furry conventions, and even kitchen sink cons like Kineticon or like Dragon Con. You will see an average of 4 to 5 shows happening a weekend across the country, in some cases even in adjacent states.
Well, I will actually say that I think in certain areas this isn't a good thing. And I don't want to ruin anybody's fun, but for example, Florida has like 29 conventions, I think, in a year, last I counted. And if you notice, you have a lot of the conventions that are succeeding, but then you have those first years that can't grow because they're consistently competing with other bigger conventions. And it kind of worries me because while I enjoy the fact that fans are getting together and making an event for them, I do wonder if people realize how much stiff competition is out there.
There's a ton of stiff competition, and it's also to a point where a show does have to grow in order to truly succeed. They have to pass maybe if you want to say the 4 digit or 5 digit in terms of attendance numbers to really say we've grown to something spectacular. What else can we do with it? And a lot of the times you'll see conventions try to branch out. For example, Otakon, in order to do a lot with the tax break, they started Otakon Vegas over the same weekend as MagFest, and their whole purpose to that was simply sell tickets and touch another area of the nation that they otherwise wouldn't. Did you? Now you're in Vegas as well. Did you get to do Otakon Vegas?
Yeah, that's actually where I saw Ian, magically enough. We weren't there as guests. I was helping Shark Robot. So I got to see it from a dealer's perspective. I did have, personally, as a fan, some issues with the convention here or there. Like, I feel it is a first year, but the video game section was super lacking despite being in, like, the arcade capital of the world. I mean, you can get arcade cabinets super easy. And I, personally, as a Vegas,
They're normally called a casino or what are they? Penny stocks, penny slide machines
mm.
in Vegas. No, there's if you want to sit down at a soulless machine for 8 hours straight, Las Vegas is the town to do it.
Well, there's also a lot of arcades for kids and teenagers, though, like DDR machines and things like that, and
Hmm.
that wasn't present at the convention. And I'm not exactly sure Planet Hollywood has an arcade, but my biggest issue with the entire thing was the venue. They picked the only casino in Vegas that I know of that doesn't have a true entrance. The only way you can enter into the casino, let's say you get off at, you get into the parking garage and you are trying to get to where you need to go, you have to walk through a mall for 15 to 20 minutes before you can get to the actual convention.
And the only way out is in debt.
I just found it really surprising that there were people who liked the venue when it's, I believe, one of the most confusing layouts on the strip, and that they're going back next year. That was my only biggest issue with it. But otherwise, people seemed to have fun. They had a decent amount of guests, and it seemed fairly reasonably organized for a first year convention. But I will say I was expecting a little bit more from Otakon.
It is so fascinating to see the local shows competing with the bigger shows because I ended up doing a lot of private shows that were first year college cons. College cons are great to get a local feel for the kids around that area because the college cons are going to pull in a lot of elementary school students, high school students. So you'll see the people that'll end up sticking within the convention circuit over the next few years and those who are going to drop out. It's a nice sort of filter screen to see who's going to be up and coming and who you're going to see more than a few times a year. I mean, that being said, the smaller cons end up being more of a 3 day vacation, I want to say, in someone's backyard treehouse because it becomes a local thing. It becomes a very fun flair thing. The when I was down in goodness, was it Louisville or Shepherds? I think it was Shepherdsville, Kentucky. I got to see an event that I want to see at every other cosplay convention afterwards. Cosplay wrestling. They got the local wrestlers in, and they had Monkey D. Luffy versus Naruto, Bruce Banner slash the Hulk versus Loki, and their final two-way tag team death match was Pinkie Pie and Deadpool versus Rainbow Dash and Black Star. And I found myself getting so involved in it, more so than I've ever had to gotten into a panel, even with audience participation, of getting that excited to see the local talent and really the local color. In Rainbow Dash's case, all 7 colors, as bright as they were. You still got to
That's
see fan enthusiasm.
unique.
Yeah, you still got to see fan enthusiasm. You still got to see something that could only come from fans, that could only come from a distinct love of a show, of a medium.
I do think it's interesting how conventions are branching out, though. For example, there's a convention we're going to in August called Anime California that has a big League of Legends focus. And I like that I'm seeing more conventions who are attempting to do themes that aren't just focused on anime, or at least having themes at all. Because sometimes you go to conventions and they're a mishmash of everything, and that's cool, but sometimes I like a little bit more order, personally.
I can completely see that. I mean, you'll also have the shows that get so big, they simply become San Diego Comic-Con Take Two. We saw that happen in New York with the New York Anime Festival, then becoming New York Comic-Con slash festival, and then almost the way that like a body will destroy and break down a cyst or a boil, Comic-Con simply took over and decided we'll have an anime track if need be. But we're primarily here to show the cast of the Avengers, the cast of The Walking Dead, and it's neat to see what happens when a corporate show ends up dismissing the people who make the show, and that is the fans. Give me a medium-sized convention any day. Give me something that grew out of someone's basement, because the moment it becomes a big enough show for profit, like if I see a local show that can take over billboards or can take over subway signs or can get television commercials, then I'm more hesitant to go to the big shows because you're going to spend the whole weekend walking but going nowhere. And I end up having that issue at Otakon, it being so big, I'm going to see at least 200 people that I know, but for that split second when we're crossing each other in the hallway. And that's why I always pitch and always try to go to medium shows and small shows where I can stay on the floor and actually engage with people, end up giving fans and friends the one resource that you can at a show, which is time.
I can understand that. I mean, one of my favorite shows from a personal standpoint is Anime Vegas, which I believe is in the 5,000 or so range, which is still reasonably large. But,
Mm.
I grew up with that convention. I've gone to it 9 years. And I just, even though I don't know many people at the convention, ironically enough, I just feel like if there's anyone that I can interact with or whenever I'm doing panels, there's a connection there. And so I can see where you're coming from with that.
It's your area, and especially, I mean, if you're grounded in one location as a go-to panel discussion leader, because you'll see the same people go within the educational track of programming. Then you'll see the fans who are only there to do the Ask a Blank panel, which that has been, I mean, I don't know whether the Hitalia fans were the ones who started that whole trend of I've got a bunch of teenagers, we can all dress from the same show, we'll get a badge to just BS and do in show jokes in front of a crowd. If that was the beginning or the end, or at least a watering down of the quality that you were going to see throughout panels. If I look over a program guide and there's more than 3 of those, or there's more than 3 Ask a Homestuck Troll, it simply no longer is an anime show. It's now just a convention and a fan base show, which come with their own pros and cons, definitely. As you sort of see the muck, what used to be DeviantArt then simply gave way to Tumblr, where it's all about fan convergence. It's Avengers as Sailor Scouts steampunk. It's the cast of Avatar, Disney princesses as Sailor Scouts. Everything's just sort of being a Venn diagram, and somewhere where the 2 or 3 meet in the middle, you'll see those original fan costumes. You'll then see that content to where I've been saying it for the last 2 years while hosting masquerades. Is anime conventions are no longer about the anime. They're no longer a rare place for sort of dissuaded or hardcore collectors to gather and trade off VHS tapes and trade. I never see someone go to an anime show with DVDs or CDs under their arm anymore to trade off and learn about something new. Everything for free access that you have online with Crunchyroll, with Hulu, almost defeats the purpose of having a dealer's room to begin with. The artist alley is where I'll spend most of my time because that's a fan created piece of artwork. My girlfriend we have a neighbor who sews, and my girlfriend makes soaps shaped like the TARDISes, or she'll make them based off of starting Pokemons that all smell different, a different color. And I end up going to that more than the official merchandise. You see a really interesting convergence with everything sort of being a fandom show rather than an anime specific show when it became a secondary source. And I had to just update just to keep my audience in my stand up shows of just talking more about general geekydom than something anime specific. It's become a much needed transition, I hope.
Well, no, I have to say, because I was going to ask you about, having to not necessarily conform, but include, stuff that's becoming more predominant and more mainstream. But this actually reminds me of how different shows can be from one week to the next. For example, when Psy's Gundam Style was super popular, like it had just come out, we started a How to Dance Gundam Style panel. And it,
Hmm.
it actually had the entire dance to it, except less booty bumping with the background dancers just to make it a little bit more friendly. So I remember we did that at Youmacon and it went super well. 3 days later, I was at Anime Vegas doing the same panel, but halfway through, the audience got too tired to continue. So I had to improvise really quick, and there happened to be two sighs in the room, so they had a sigh off. I had to, get them to essentially be entertainment for to a certain degree because once the room participation was gone, the panel had to change completely.
There's a certain energy that definitely touches in different areas of the state. You'll see the same level of enthusiasm, but for my money, the most actively, the people who don't want to stop moving, don't want to stop dancing, don't want to stop raving are all the shows I've ever seen in Florida. Some of the most mellow and taciturn people I saw at Anime Expo asking, "So, what do you hear for the show? They've got the following guests here this year. They've got all these launches. What are you here for?" I'm just gonna show up, whatever. If I make it inside, then I do. It gets really crazy at these shows. We get really, energetic here in Los Angeles. I need a salad. Like, what is this? New Jersey would have devoured you by this point. I'm a New Yorker. I'm naturally walking at 13 miles an hour and just nervously biting my fingernails down to stubs because there's never enough media intake for me. And you'll see a lot of enthusiasm up in the Northeast and the Midwest. I haven't seen enough of the Midwest to really characterize. I know that I love doing the South. They're some of my favorite audiences. They're some of the most quiet and respectful until you start getting into the local flair. I.e., the independent wrestling circuit, i.e., the video game tournament circuit. Then that's where you're going to see the real hardcore fans. It's a vague generalization, I know, because if you've gone to sci-fi and fantasy shows and you go to an anime show, it's going to be like stepping out of ballroom dancing into a full-on rave. And when you see that energy mesh with a show that it doesn't belong, like either Dragon Con can have older attendees, or certainly PhilCon has a very set number of attendees and has for several years. When a young kid dressed as Adventure Time, dressed as Homestuck, dressed as Pony steps in, they're going to look like a sore thumb sticking out across all of the older costumers. That's always interesting to me is to see the micro generalizations of not just the fandom of a show, but the demographic across a nation.
No, I can agree with that completely. It reminds me of when we live broadcast at conventions, and to get people to dance, you can't just play the music. You have to be energetic. You have to, like, scream at the top of your lungs or clap or do something. You almost have to cheerleader it is the best way I can describe it. And some shows, it's so easy to get a group of people to dance. And other shows, I could be jumping on a chair for 2, 3 hours and everyone will just glance at me and walk by.
Yeah, it's amazing, and you truly don't know that crowd until you've done that before. I mean, my most exciting and also terrifying weekends are when I'm in a brand new state. I'm gonna hit Anime Iowa for the first time this year. I've done Anime Milwaukee, but I have never stepped foot in Iowa. I used to go to Lincoln, Nebraska every now and then for the International Thespian Society because my high school was part of that group, but I never stepped foot in Iowa. I know everything about Iowa from The Music Man, and I have a feeling that's a bit outdated. So I'm never quite sure what kind of energy to give out before a show until I've walked the floor for a good hour. Check out if there's any spontaneous dancing or is everyone sitting on the floor. Check out the majority of cosplays. Check out how crowded the video game area is and what are my other uh, competitors. Who is the longest going, most established, most attended local panelist? That gives me a very good idea of how to present it. If it's someone academic, if it's a local dealer, if it's a local musical or voice acting talent, you have a better sense of it. But if I just get off the plane and then get put up on stage, it's sink or swim, son.
Yeah, I can understand that scary feeling.
And I'll tell you this, no matter how many times you put in the contract, not every show is there ready to throw you a lifesaver.
Yeah, that's true. Contracts sometimes can be few and far between depending on the convention, but that's probably not necessarily the best conversation to go after because we're going to take a short break here on 91.8 The Fan, but don't go anywhere because our special guest isn't. So keep it tuned to your favorite station where we play everything you want and nothing you don't. Hey everybody out there, you're tuned in to 91.8 The Fan. My special guest is still here, alive and breathing.
Yeah, Uncle Yogi, comedian here. Very cool to be back on the fan after almost a 4-year break. Can you believe that?
I know we need to have you on more often. It should just be a yearly thing.
You know how to find me.
Yeah, that's true.
We
But
just bought the apartment too in Queens, so we are not going anywhere for a very long time.
oh, perfect. Well, for the fans out there who want to catch your show, on the convention circuit, what conventions do you have coming up?
The thing is, once spring comes around, spring always ends up being busier for me than the summer. For example, the weekend of February 22nd, 23rd, we are at Yukon, which is in Connecticut. I'm then returning to Denver, Colorado for Anime Land Wasabi, the end of February, beginning of March. I'm back in Toricon up in Rochester. I'm reading this all off of UncleYo.com too. University of Rhode Island is having a gaming convention. I'm going to be running a ton of RPGs there back in Techo Shokan in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then we hop over the border to Shinboku-con in Ohio. And then I wrap up the spring season with Zenkai-con in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is, for me, just like going to be coming home. That was the first show I ever performed at, the first show I ever went public on. And they have just been wonderful people and dear friends of mine ever since then. So I love doing all my PA shows. And considering that I'm now kind of a staple at Setsucon in Penn State, I love covering a majority of my home state of Pennsylvania.
Well, now for the fans who want to keep up to date on that stuff, obviously you have your website, but do you
Hmm.
do the social media thing as well?
Absolutely. There's always Uncle Yo, all one word, at Twitter. I also weekly, if not bi-weekly, try to update stuff on the Uncle Yo fan page on Facebook. That's the one that has about 3K in likes so far. I think we just lost three, but we're still above 3K, which is really exciting for me. And I mean, I was able to do a lot of promotion with that. I had a play open up off Broadway back in January in right in Theater Row in Manhattan, and it went off really well. And I can't thank friends and family enough for making us pass our Indiegogo project goal, giving us a budget for lighting, costuming, and all the props that we had to use on that show.
Well, for the listeners out there, obviously do you want to promote the show a little bit more? Do you have anything to talk about with that, or are there other projects down the line that you want to talk about?
There's a lot more. I mean, I did a lot of prep work for the satirical comedy Parables for the 1%, and right now it's a matter of shipping the script around and seeing if there's a festival interested in producing it, or if there's a smaller theater interested in producing it. But for the most part, we are cranking along for something that I'm going to launch hopefully by March is the final deadline I gave myself. The idea being that it is a fantasy sitcom that deals with monsters in a fantasy game setting. Thrak is a hoarding, socially awkward Cyclops. Benny the Wraith is his depressed roommate, and then there's their NPC hook Jill. It's a lot of RPG and references, but primarily it's a it's Avenue Q as written by the Venture Brothers. It's the Odd Couple, but they're fantasy monsters, and it's all done with puppets. And that's going to be available on the Uncle Yo YouTube channel. And my goal for 2014, I think I can do this, is get out 13 solid episodes, get an actual solid first season on complete shoestring budget, complete green screen budget, and that bad boys is called Dungeon Crawlers, and we've been working on this idea for about 2 years now. So I'm very excited to have that up.
I am convinced you could sell anything because that sounds like one of the most amazing ideas I've ever heard.
We're definitely getting a lot of people from keep your ears peeled for voice actor spots, and also anime abridged community people are stepping in to do some bit roles and bit voices. We have a ton of fun every time that we film, and we're just sculpting and trying to micromanage the editing, the music, the backgrounds. We want this to be the absolute best that it can be, with really just enthusiasm and the wonderful prop work. We had a wonderful puppet theater down in DC create the puppets, and they were, as I was going over what I wanted the main Cyclops Thrak to look like, they said, we have a bolt of Muppet flesh that we could actually sculpt to this. And I thought, Muppets come from machines? Their flesh comes in like bolts, like satin? Or no, it's Muppet skin is magical. Like, if you're not getting it from say like Miss Piggy's liposuction or like Beaker's castration, you can't just pick and buy Muppet flesh. It is sacred. It's made of dreams and fairy farts. And
That's good to know next time I go to any of the Muppet rides in Disney or what have you.
it's a hard visual, but sometimes the childhood dream has to die. You have to come to face the facts. It comes from a machine. Tell the people, Muppet skin is industrial.
Next thing you'll tell me is that Santa isn't real, and then I'll really have to kick you off the show.
No, but I will tell you that he is converted to Jewish for Mrs. Claus.
Huh.
It's just a gig for him. That's okay. He still loves you. Just a bit hesitant, you know.
I don't know. I think I'm okay with that.
The hardest people who've liked the puppets was I can't figure out why, but my cat is in love with the puppet. The moment Thrak comes down, the moment that, and this is a big puppet too. This thing is from the torso to my head is how big he is, but disproportionately. Like, his head is the size of my chest and abdomen. But the cat comes over every time and just sniffs and licks the hand as much as he can. And I'm still trying to figure out how, but apparently dogs and cats love Muppets way more than their puppeteers do.
That really surprises me because I can only imagine my cat. She's 11 years old, and I feel that she would be afraid of this thing, especially if it began to move.
She's put up enough with it. Yeah, he can't get enough of Thrack and Benny.
Very interesting. Well, we'll look out for that series. Is there anything else you want to tell the listeners out there?
It's just been a matter of sculpting the new show, and I'm hoping to get another album out by 2015. The last two that I've produced since being on the show were Matching Hair Clips, which a majority of the profits went to support the 2011 tsunami crash. So thank you to everyone who bought the album online, because a lot of it went to the Red Cross. And then the newest album, Ecto Kit Lorian, is that's where I finally retire my massive 1980s buildup. Essentially, the question of what if everything in the Expendables punched one thing at the same time? What would be the consequences? And I guess the new bit that you'll see in convention schedules is called Living the American Meme, which is essentially redefining and taking into yourself what it means to be a normal American nerd, an American geek. We see it debated again and again. You see shows like The Big Bang Theory, Heroes of Cosplay, trying to over glamorize, over dramatize, and take the humanity away from the fandom. And then you see it fought back on the opposite side by fans who set up their own convention, people who are doing series like LARPers, setting up, say, the Guild or the Nerdist Network, creative nerds on our side of the fence producing something for fans. Geeks don't watch Big Bang Theory. It's too watered down. They watch Community because it's as smart as they are and takes their intelligence as seriously.
I think it's funny you mentioned that because out of just sheer coincidence, my mom the other night was like, "Oh yeah, that show you watch with that guy," and I was like, "What show are you talking about?" The skinny guy. Are you talking about Big Bang Theory? I don't even have cable. I've never even seen the show.
The thing with the guy and the thing, your mom identifies everything the way that my mother does.
Well, my mom's 60 and she's a little bit older, but and Pokemon to her is still Pikachu. That's all it is. Pokemon is Pikachu. So, and I watch Big Bang Theory apparently because I guess it is nerdy. Even I've literally never seen the show. I don't know where she got that
Yeah,
from.
no, it's not even a gateway drug for people who want to explore Doctor Who or any of the fandoms that they used more as punchlines than setup, and that ends up being the big question: is the reference its own punchline, or are they actually playing with it? They made the go-to Settlers of Catan joke of "I've got wood, give me a sheep and I'll give you wood" to trade, as in the resource card. Or are they actually just using it as the reference? That so lame as Dungeons and Dragons, canned laughter from the audience. That's another just great subconscious bump, and I'm so glad that sitcoms today aren't using canned laughter to tell us when to laugh. We're Americans. We've been watching shows our whole life. We're smart enough to know when and where the joke is.
Maybe one day they'll do some sort of reference. Can I attack the darkness or something? That'll at least get me to laugh.
Oh, Benny attacks plenty of the darkness in Dungeon Crawlers. I'll give you that warning fair and square.
Perfect. Well, since I know that you have to leave us, thank you so much for being on the show today, and hopefully we got to promote everything that you wanted to promote.
It's been my pleasure. And if people want to hear me rant, rave, and cry to myself, every week we do a podcast called "We Are the Geek" right here for my place in Queens. We're in the middle of a big bump of alternative green energy sources right now, and then the moment that's done, I think I'm gonna do a series on the Disney movies that got successful and unsuccessful Saturday morning cartoon development. So always keep your eyes and ears peeled. I'm always around.
Interesting. We'll make sure to check it out, and thanks again for joining us.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Jackie. Take care. Live, laugh, and glomp.
And for any of the listeners out there that missed any of this interview, don't fret. You can catch it on the website within the next few days. So keep your eyes peeled to 918thefan.com and your ears tuned to 91.8 The Fan, where we play everything you want and nothing you don't.